guys, I'm I'm here to take you on general genetics, and I just hope you sit down and enjoy the video. Thank you. But what do you understand by the word genetics? Genetics, this context simply means the study of heredity. The word simply means the study of heredity. So how do we actually study heredity? And what is the importance of heredity? Well, heredity simply means a particular trait, or let me say traits or characteristics that are being transferred from parent to offspring. So these traits that are being transferred from parent to offspring are very, very important to understand in our day-to-day activities, because some of these actually influences our morphology. Morphology simply means our physical aspect, and also our internal structures. It has also helped scientists to solve so many problems relating to our health and also our lifestyle. But first, which part of the body system that actually give rise to this wonderful thing? Well, it all arises from the cell. Now, the cell is very, very important to study, but it occurs that this heredity, this genetics, is present in a particular part of the cell known as nucleus. And in the part of nucleus, the one that is responsible, because the nucleus is composed of what we call nucleus and also the chromosome. So the nucleus, the chromosome is the one present in the nucleus that is responsible for the transfer of genetic material, as it houses a structure known as the DNA. The DNA helps to pass genetic materials from one offspring to another, which helps to build the complex structure that we see of ourselves as human and other entities. So now, having seen that the chain all starts from the cell, we want to understand first what this cell is all about before we move on to other aspects. The question is, what is cell and how it is very, very important to the body of an organism? Well, when we want to talk about cell, cell simply means the basic structural and functional unit of life. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. So this simply means for every living organisms on earth, they are made up of cell, because it counts as the structure is composed of cell, and the function they carry all lies in the cell. So now we want to know, what are the fundamental theories that guards a cell? The theories that guard a cell: one, it is very important for us to understand that cell is the basic structural unit of life. So what do we mean by cell being the basic structural unit of life? Cell being the basic structural unit of life simply means for every structure of living organism are built up by the cell. So when you see a human being, each structure is composed of thousands and billions of cells that makes it a human being that you know. So every organism, starting from the most simple to the most complex, the structure are composed of what we call cell. So we also have to, as the functional unit of life. So cell is the functional unit of life simply means every function performed by a human or by any living entity is made up or composed or housed inside itself. So that means cell is the one that actually take out the function that all living entities perform. Then the term you need to understand is cell give birth to cell. Now, what do we mean by cell give birth to cell? It simply means every cell arises from a pre-existing cells. So there is no cell that has come without having an ancestor. So all cells give rise to another cell before differentiation will occur. So let's say we want to look at the makeup of a human being, of a living organism. You will find out that this cell, first of all, need to undergo what we call cell differentiation. So first, cell will divide. Cell division, then cell differentiation will occur. Then if cell division occurs, which is a splitting of cells, and we'll be talking about that obviously in our next classes, the division of cells will have to occur first. Then the differentiation simply means each cell has to differentiate to perform different function, which is the one responsible for respiration will mold itself to that, and the one responsible for feeding will mold itself to that. Then we now have cell enlargement. So each cell will now enlarge, giving room for growth of a living organism. So we can see that cells giving birth to cell really made up an entire organism. Now we have two aspects of cells that we are going to be looking at. The first, we should understand they are unicellular and we have multicellular organisms. So we have organisms that are made up of only one cell. We call them unicellular organisms. So cell classification based on organism. Cell classification based on number in organism. So the first thing we talk about is unicellular, and the second thing we have to talk about is what? Multicellular. So when we say unicellular, what are we trying to say? We are saying that cells are made up of one. Organisms that have only one cell is what we refer to as unicellular. Now you can give me an example of that. You can feel free to pass out the video. Examples of unicellular organisms we have the likes of amoeba, we have the likes of paramecium, and we have the likes of yobina. These are organisms that are made up of only one cell. We have yobina, we have paramecium, and we also have what we call chlamydomonas. So for the multicellular organism, it simply means organisms that are made up of more than one cell. We call them multicellular, that is multiple cells. Examples of all those organisms, I'm starting from us as a human being. We complex organisms are made up of only more than one cell. That is, we have humans. You have the Spirogyra as a lower organism. It's made up of many cells. We have the goat and we have the sheep. Feel free to pass the video if you know some. And we have what? We have invertebrates. Some invertebrates as well. Example of some invertebrates, we have the lizard and thereabouts. They are all the platyhelminthes. We have the lizards as well, which is under the vertebrates. So these are examples of organisms. There are thousands of them. You can decide to write them there. These organisms are made up of many cells. That is, they are composed. The structural component of it are made up of many cells. And these unicellular are only made up of single cell. So we are also going to look at the classification of cell based on the primitive and the new or the recent modification of cell. Now we have what we call the organization of cell. Okay, we'll be looking at the organization, classification of cell based on its content organization. Classification of cell based on its content organization. Classification of cell based on its contents organization. So So we are going to have two major classification, which I have been talking about. We have the prokaryotic and we have the what? Eukaryotic. So let's look at the first context of it, which is the prokaryotic. Now looking at the prokaryotic, the word pro simply means primitive or before, old. Primitive, karyot, standing for the nucleus. So they have the primitive type of nucleus. The pro, which is the primitive, and the karyot, which is the nucleus. They have primitive nucleus. It simply means the prokaryotic organisms are organisms that do not have organized nucleus and thus lack a nuclear membrane. So talking about prokaryotic organisms, they do not have organized nucleus. That is, the nucleus is not organized. It's not in a good shape. It's not, properly arranged. And thus they lack a nuclear membrane. Let's take, for example, we have a cell, and inside this cell we have a nucleus, isn't it? But in the context of the prokaryotic organism, there is supposed to be a membrane that surrounds the nucleus, whereby you will have the content of the chromosome inside, floating inside the nucleus. But for this prokaryotic, they do not have a nuclear membrane. So rather, it is being removed. They don't have. So this content that we are talking about, we have other cellular components that is supposed to be inside, will now be scattered around the cytoplasm, instead of it being enclosed in the nucleus. So that is why we say they do not have. So you will now see them falling out to be this shape. You now see the content like this scattered inside the cytoplasm. So this simply tells you that they do not have organized nucleus, and they do not have a membrane bounded organelle. The contents are not bounded by a membrane, so they are left wound around the cytoplasm. So we'll be seeing some examples of the prokaryotic that I am talking about. So what are the examples of the prokaryotic? Yes, examples of prokaryotic. You can give it a try. Examples of prokaryotic. So the examples of prokaryotic we have the bacteria, we have the virus, and we have the archaebacteria. So these are examples of organisms that do not have organized nucleus, and their membrane, their content are not bounded by what? The membrane. So then we move to the second, which is known as what? Eukaryotic. So the word "use" simply means what? True. And eukaryotic means what? Nucleus. This simply means they have what we call true nucleus. That is, the eukaryotic organisms are organisms that have membrane-bounded organelles and have an organized nucleus. So they have an organized nucleus and also have a membrane-bounded organelle. So the eukaryotic have an organized nucleus and also have a membrane-bounded organelle. So you can see it's quite different from the prokaryotic. So you see the content of a eukaryotic organism, that all the content of a eukaryotic organism are organized inside the membrane. So you see, when you see a mitochondria inside a eukaryotic organism, it is enclosed by a membrane. And the nucleus specifically is covered by a nuclear membrane. And the content is the nucleolus inside. Another content which refers to the chromosomes are housed inside the what? The membrane of the nucleus. So you can see that the cell structure of the eukaryotic organisms are very organized compared to that of the prokaryotic organisms. Examples of organisms that have this true nucleus. Starting from the most simple, we have the protozoans, which include the amoeba, the paramecium. Then we have the invertebrates. We have an organized nuclear membrane. The invertebrates we have include the platyhelminths. The platyhelminths. When we say platyhelminths, we mean the worms. We have the coelentrates, which include the hydra. And there are so many of them. We have the nematodes. And we have the echinodermata, etc. And then you have the starfish, the sea urchins. So talking about your vertebrates, they all fall under these eukaryotic organisms because they have an organized nucleus. So now we want to see the major differences between a prokaryotic organism and a eukaryotic organism. Since we understand clearly what the definition and the meaning of both of them is, let's see the differences between both of them. Now, the differences. So we have the prokaryotic organisms and we have the eukaryotic organisms. So talking about the prokaryotic, we said they do not have organized nucleus. And these ones have organized nucleus. Then their membrane, their organelles are not bounded by a membrane. I think we've discussed that earlier, that the content of the prokaryotic are not bounded by a membrane. So the organelles are not bounded by a membrane. And the organelles are bounded, which is the eukaryotic organisms, their organelles are bounded by a membrane. So talking about the third one, which is the DNA structure or the DNA component. The DNA structure of a prokaryotic organism is found in shape. Is found in shape, while that of a eukaryotic organism is helical in structure. The DNA structure of a eukaryotic is helical in structure. So these are the major differences between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms. So let's look at the shape of the cells and the function of it to a particular organism. What is the relationship between the shape of the cell of an organism and its respects to the function? We want to know. So let's say you observe that the shape of cells So, so talking about the shape of cells in respect to their function. Now, the body system is designed in such a way that the shape of cell will tell which particular function that they do. So we are going to be citing out some shape of cells and their related function to that. So let's see for some circular cells. An example of a good circular cells that we're talking about is the red blood cell. Now you can clearly see that the red blood cell is circular or round in shape, which is given a color of red color by the presence of a substance or a protein known as hemoglobin. So the red blood cell is red in color because of the pigments present in it known as hemoglobin. But the question is, why is it round? Why is it not rectangle? Or why is it not another shape? This is because the function performed by the red blood cell is so unique and related to its shape. The cell, we know that the cell transports oxygen in order to release energy throughout the body system. Now, this oxygen cannot be transferred easily without a good surface area for it to pass through. So, for oxygen to diffuse into the cells of the body, it needs a round, open shape for it to enter. So, we can see that the red blood cell oxygen. Oxygen can enter inside the red blood cell easily. Why? Because it is disc or circular in shape. And if you observe, most cells that have problem, if the red blood cell has problem, then the body function of intake of oxygen will now be limited. For example, you find out that when the shape of this cell that is supposed to be round in shape change to a sickle, a sickle shape. Of course, you know your sickle that used to harvest time. When it changes to sickle, which is abnormal to the normal shape of this cell, you will find out that the content of oxygen will find it hard to enter or penetrate inside. So oxygen will now be difficult to be spread around the body system, and therefore the patient might be suffering from anemia or might even lead to the death. So this is to show how important the shape of the cell really has to do with its function. Now, let's look at another example of what I'm trying to say, which is irregular shapes, cells that have irregular shape. Now, an irregular shaped cell. So, talking about irregular shaped cells, these are the type, for example, we have the white blood cell. Most of the cases, you find out that the white blood cell is irregular in shape. That is, it doesn't have a definite shape, or we can refer to it as amoeboid in shape. We can call it amoeboid in shape. So since the cell is amoeboid in shape, then it will not have a particular shape, and this is because the white blood cell helps in defending the body. Now, this helps in defending the body against diseases. Since the white blood cell helps in defending the body against disease, you never can tell which type of soldier can actually invade the body system. So therefore, they modify their shape to any form that invade the body system in order for them to tackle it. So this is the essence of it being a what? Irregular in shape. Now let's look at the nerve cells that are rectangular in shape. So the rectangular shape cell. A good example is your nerve cell. And you can see having tree-like ending. When we say tree-like ending, you see it like this, and now having hair in form of what? Tree. So this is not the way diagram, I'm trying to picture it out for you. So you see that it has a tree-like ending, which is a branch ending, and has a rod-like or rectangular in shape. The essence of this is for it to have pathway in transporting impulses, to ease the transportation of impulse or electrical impulse. The essence of this in the nerve cell is to ease electrical impulse transfer from one part of the cell to another. So this is the shapes of the what? Cells in respect to their function. So I want you to identify more shape of the cell and explain their related function. I want you to observe that. Feel free to pause the video, observe your body system, and you see if they are actually related to their function. You observe the shape of your cells and see if they actually relate to their function. Feel free to pause the video. So now we'll be looking at the next thing, which is the size of the cell. Of course, let's say we want to distinguish between the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic cell. The size is an important part we can't escape. Now, the size of cells actually varies in different organisms, but looking at the context in aspect of prokaryotic organisms, size differ. Some cells are bigger, some cells are smaller, depending also on their function, because the size also relates to the function of different organisms. For example, when we talk about the nerve cells, they are very, very long. That it can even reach 3.5 feet. So you can see that the nerve cell can be as long as 3.5 feet. The size is very important because impulses can easily pass from stretched or elongated nerve cells to another. So we also observe that prokaryotic organisms, viewing it in the aspect of prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms, so you find larger cells in the eukaryotic organisms compared to that of the prokaryotic organisms. So the largest cell that is said to exist in living organisms is found in ostrich. Ostrich has the largest size of the cell, which is its egg cell. So ostrich has the largest size, and it is found to be 175 millimeter. So this is it about the size of the cell and the related function, and also the shape of the cell in respect to their function. So we will be moving to different organelles that are present in the cell and their related function to the cell. So we will be starting with the first one, which is the cell wall. Let's say, so we want to look at different content of the cell and its function. Of course, we know that the cell has different content, different components, starting from the cytoplasm that houses everything, including the content, coming to the external aspect of it, which is the cell's wall and the cell membrane. So normally, before we talk about the cell contents and its function, you should understand that we have two different types of cells. The first thing you need to know is we have the plant cell and we have the animal cell. So the plant and animal cell were being discovered by the two scientists known as Matthias Levin, discovered the plant cell, and we have the square. Talking about the animal cell. So these two differ in terms of the cell composition and its structure. Talking about the first aspect, which is the plant cells are mostly rectangular in shape. While these are circular. Sometimes you can see some irregular. So, the plant cells are made up of cell wall, while the animal cells do not have cell wall. Now, the plant cell has chloroplast, while the animal cell do not have. So talking about other differences, the plant cell has no centriole, while the animal cell has centriole. Now centriole is responsible or is important during cell division for animal cells. So we'll be discussing that in our nearest classes. So these are the major differences between plant and animal cells. And the rest of the organelles we'll be talking about are being shared by both of them. So we want to see now the content of a cell and its respective function. So we are going to start from the external aspect of it, which is the cell wall for plants. So contents of the cell, and its function. So we will be talking about the content of the cells and its function. And we are going to be starting with the cell wall. So we are going to start with the cell wall, and we'll see the function, and we'll see how they actually work to make sure that organisms are in the right position. So in our next video, we'll be talking about cell wall and other components of the cell and its function. Please, if you enjoyed this video, share it to your friends, and please subscribe. This is Learner's Connect. I would love you to be among us and enjoy the video. Thank you very much. I remain Abdul Mohammed. See you.